Peace, and welcome to the Transformer sample episode of Oddly Familiar. Today's episode is all about a sample that appears on the Spectrasonics Distorted Reality Volume 2 sample library. Two things before we begin. First, shout out to Big Salsa. They supplied us with a long list of games that this was used in. And second, every video from now on will have a second upload on Patreon with no ads and no commercials. And you can join for as little as $1 per month. You can find a link in the description. So with that out of the way, let's get this started. The sample we're talking about today is titled Transformer. Here it is uncut and unedited. Our first game up today is Spyro 2, Rip2's Rage, the theme titled Aquaria Towers. First released on November 2nd of 1999 for the PlayStation 1, the soundtrack was composed by Stuart Copeland. You may know of him because of his work on such movies like Men at Work with Charlie Sheen and Emilio Estevez, or Good Burger with Keenan and Kel. Other people may know him as one of the co-founders of the group The Police, quite a popular band to say the least. The sample was sped up in Spyro, but it's still easily recognizable. The next game up to feature the sample is Chrono Cross, the Chronopolis theme. Chrono Cross was released on the PlayStation 1 on November 18th of 1999, about 2 weeks after Spyro 2. A remake by the name of Chrono Cross, the Radical Dreamers Edition, was released in 2022, and it has the same soundtrack, so it features the same sample. It claims higher quality background music, but everything is the same. Composed by Yasunori Mitsuda, he is one of the greats, and I highly recommend his work. This one, like Spyro 2, also uses a sped up sample. However, this one isn't as fast. Up next is from Myst 3, Exile, and it's titled The Airship Chasm. First released on Mac and PC on May 7th of 2001, with console releases hitting shelves over 1 year later. Composed by Jack Wall, he's worked on a bunch of games. The sample itself sounds near to the original. It seems to have minimal editing, so it is pretty easy to hear. The next up is Wave Race, Blue Storm, the theme for the stormy Lost Temple Lagoon. First released on September 14th, 2001 on the Nintendo GameCube. This is the sequel to Wave Race 64, and the third in the series overall. The soundtrack was composed by Lawrence Schwedler and James Phillipson. I'm not sure which of the two did this exact theme, as video game music credits aren't the easiest thing to find. The sample is pretty well hidden in this one. It takes a little bit of listening, as it was slowed down quite a bit. next game on our list today is Devil May Cry 2, and the theme, Mysterious Ruins. First released on January 25th of 2003. The soundtrack was composed by 3 people, and of course, the credits are only partially known. It reminds me of the Super Mario movie, and the fact they didn't even credit Grant Kirkhope for the DK rap. Why would you even put this in the credits and then not even give credit to the writer? I long for the day when devs actually give the composers in video games some sort of credits. But let me stop ranting. The sample is kind of well hidden, but it's easier to pick out than our previous entry. Up next is from the game Rayman 3 Hoodlum Havoc, and it's titled The Even Longer Shortcut. Released on multiple consoles, but first released on Nintendo GameCube and Game Boy Advance on February 21st of 2003. The sample does not appear on the Game Boy Advance version. With its limitations, it's really no surprise. However, you can find it on pretty much every other version. A pretty easy one to hear. It's sped up, but it's not covered up by a lot of instruments like some other usages of the sample. The next theme today comes from Final Fantasy X2, Zanarkand Ruins. Believe it or not, this soundtrack was not produced by Nobuo Uematsu, although it does contain some of his compositions. First released on March 13th of 2003, this game was exclusive to the PS2 until it was re-released in HD for the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita. It was also released on the PlayStation 4 in 2015, PC in 2016, then the Switch and Xbox One in 2019. All of the games contain the same soundtrack, so you can find the sample in every single one of them. Next up is another Myst game, Uru Ages Beyond Myst, a theme titled Out of the Hive. Released on November 11th of 2003, this is the 4th game in the Myst series. The sample was already used in the 3rd Myst game, and it could be a coincidence considering the games have different composers. Myst 3 by Jack Wall, and this one by Tim Larkin. Or it could be a case of the Segas. They sent out the same sample library to both composers. The themes are completely different, and they used the sample in completely different ways, although both are pretty easy to hear. The next game is Metroid Prime Hunters, the opening prologue. Yes, even good old Metroid contains the sample. Released on March 20th, 2006 for the Nintendo DS. Chronologically, it's the 4th entry in the series if you count the manga, and it's the 9th video game in the series according to release date. The theme suffers from some compression, but the sample is still clearly heard. It starts around the 20-second mark, and just like a lot of the usages today, it's sped up. Our next entry comes from Trackmania, Build to Race, and it's the main menu theme. Our last Nintendo game on the list, this one was released for the Wii on June 30th, 2009. If you don't know the game or the franchise, there's around 20 games to choose from. Trackmania is a series of racing games that you can find on almost any console. The first game was released in 2003 and the latest in 2020. I do gotta say, this is one of my favorite usages of the sample. I like the theme and how it builds and blends all together. The sample is easy to hear, they didn't really hide it much, but the theme still gets a thumbs up from me. The last one we have today is of course the newest game on our list. From Halo 4, the theme titled Mantis. Released on Xbox 360 on November 6th of 2012. The soundtrack was composed by Neil Davidge. He has a lot of credits, just not many video games among them. You may know his work from any number of projects. His resume contains anything from video games, to The Prodigy, to Mos Def, and even David Bowie. Quite the mix of musicians. The sample is hidden beside some bass and other instruments, but it's still pretty easy to pick up. So again, big shout out to Big Salsa. They served this episode up on a golden platter, and we ate it up. Also, shout out to Golden Tier patrons, Bearsona, Quantum X, MJJ, and Sloperij Janssen. I am ICC. Thanks for watching. Peace.